What's up, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Chris Welsh, and we have got some hot takes for you. How hot? Some are mild, some are medium, and some are a little too spicy. We are going to, test that spice with the two wonderful gentlemen, Pat Fitzmaurice and Jake Ciely, in the house. Jake, first off, are you a spice guy?
Well, which one?
You do the spice?
Are we talking about Posh or
no, not the Spice Girls, and maybe not even
okay.
the takes, because we're going to get some takes. But how about the real life, the eating of the spice?
Yes, I am to a certain degree. There's a certain cutoff where I actually legit have, for everybody out there, not put my business into the world. I think I've mentioned it on my podcast, but I do have a health risk with my UC where I can only go so far. But I am love Louisiana chicken. I use cayenne and a lot of Italian seasoning and stuff like that. So I love it, but I have to check myself.
Mr. Fitzmaurice, would you say your eating of spice or your takes are bigger? Which one can you handle?
Probably now the takes. There used to be a time when I was more into spicy food, and I still like crushed red pepper is my favorite condiment, or sriracha. But a long time ago, I used to work part-time at this liquor store, and I had these two great bosses, two of the best bosses I've ever had. These two brothers. Used to talk football with these guys for hours, but in addition to their love of football, they loved hot sauces, and they were really into the mail-order sauces that you get out of a catalog. And they would come, they'd get shipments of 20 bottles of hot sauce, and they would send me to this Chinese restaurant down the street, and we'd get a couple orders of fried rice and test out all these hot sauces on the fried rice. And some of these things were just, the only intent of manufacturing sauces like this was sadism. They were so hot. They would put you in physical discomfort when you were eating these.
We will see what level of discomfort we can push people, because you're like, Welsh, what are you talking about? Why are you talking about hot sauces? Because we're going to take the hot takes to the football hot takes. We're even going to organize them up into mild, medium, hot, spicy, and extra spicy. We have got a player for each one of these guys under said take, and that is our theme for the episode today. We've got 10 fantasy hot takes for you for the 2025 season. Pat and Jake have put these bad boys together, and we will see how much it burns, how bad it is. So we've got a lot to get to, so let's jump right into it, starting with the mild take. A wonderful mild that pretty much anybody can handle, but, we'll see how hot this ends up going. Jake, let's start with you. Your mild hot take for the 2025 season. Does it burn, or is it just right?
I think it's just right, even like you said, even maybe a little bit mild. And I'm going to say that George Kittle unseats Brock Bowers as the number one tight end in fantasy, and he actually finishes as the number one tight end in fantasy for the first time in his career. So much so, why I say it's mild is because if you go on a points per game basis last year, he was better than Brock Bowers, and I know everybody's excited about Brock and what he's going to do in his second, third, fourth year. We're looking at, just as a reference point, somebody asked me in Dynasty, would you trade Brock Bowers? It was for Marvin Harrison and another really nice player. And I was like, the value is there, but I wouldn't, because you're essentially thinking of it as, hey, I get Travis Kelce at the start of his career. So that's how much I am behind Bowers. But I think if we're trying to sit here and we figure it out on this very podcast, I've been in a couple of discussions of figuring out Juwan Jennings versus Pearsall and how much Ayuk is going to be healthy for this year. And what's the one thing we do know? George Kittle's fine. George Kittle is going to be one of the top options. And if you go back to George Kittle, where he kept falling in second and third place because of Travis Kelce, some of those seasons approaching 14 points per game. And just to go back the past 15 years, I stopped at 15 because I'm just all right, I found enough at this point. But 14 points per game on average would be no worse than 2, and sometimes the number one tight end in fantasy if you project it out over a full season. And George Kittle was right there if you take away week 18, which he didn't play the full game. Josh Dobbs was at quarterback. So I think that George Kittle being possibly the number one option while we try to figure out what's going on with the 49ers wide receivers, at worst the number 2, you get him back up to 115 to 125 targets, and not just in points per game, he'll be the number one tight end overall. So I really don't think it's that spicy.
Yeah. When I first was staring at this, I was like, oh, this might need to be a little bit hotter. This one might be one of those sneaky spicy ones. But the more that you look at it from a Fantasy Pros ECR standpoint, He's in the top 4 are their one singular tier as far as ranks. He's ECR tight end 3. He also had 5 top 3 finishes last season at tight end with multiple number ones in general. Obviously, with the as you mentioned, with the wide receiver game changing up, there's one constant, and it is George Kittle. But Mr. Pat Fitzmaurice, what do you think about this? I know you're a big Brock Bowers stan. Does this qualify to you on medium? Is this a little bit spicier than Jake's giving it credit for?
Yeah, I think it's right to categorize it as a mildly spicy take. And I'm trying not to frame this in terms of Jake being a Brock Bowers hater, which he definitely is after he gave me a tongue lashing for the notion that Brock Bowers
won't take him in the first round.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. No, but like I think the Kittle part of it is spot on, and it's funny because like I swear for the last 3 years, Kittle is never overdrafted in fantasy drafts. He's either drafted where he should be or he's a screaming value. And I think maybe people are scared that he does have the games where he disappears, where Kyle Shanahan decides he wants to use Kittle primarily as a blocker, and he has bad games like, oh, by the way, every other tight end who, no tight end produces week in, week out. It's just the nature of the position. But Kittle has those weeks where he can win you a game single-handedly. And he has a lot of those weeks every year. Like Kittle is a big play tight end, and there are not many big play tight ends. Like I absolutely believe he is capable of a tight end 1 finish. No question.
Yeah, you go back, sorry, like to jump back into your point, and where I think there is some spice, and I agree with Fitz, is that you look at 2 years ago, the healthy Christian McCaffrey season. I think that's what's in people's mind. Well, that's only 11 fantasy points per game. He did have 3 games of 100-plus yards, but he also, as Fitz is saying, he had a lot of single-digit performances, and I think that's why people are always a little afraid of George Kittle.
So, Pat, when I looked at our spicy takes here, I had to do a double take because I thought maybe this one might have belonged in a different territory. So this is going to be a classic situation of maybe we all don't hit spice the same here, because you and your take for the mild category seems quite a bit hotter than I would have given it credit for. So you tell me, this is only Pat's mild take, and what is it?
All right, it's that Ashton Jeanty will finish this season as the overall running back 1 for fantasy.
And that's mild? Just he's the number 1 overall player in all of fantasy, the rookie, and that's your mild take? You got a big sense of spice, my friend.
Here's why I think it's mild, Welsh. When a running back goes top 12 in the NFL draft, at least in recent years, the results have been pretty good. I mean, like, really good. There have been 6 running backs drafted top 12 in the last 10 years. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in 2023. And full disclosure, I made it top 12 instead of top 10 because I wanted to sneak Gibbs onto this list. Saquon Barkley in 2018. Christian McCaffrey and Leonard Fournette in 2017. And Christian McCaffrey in 2016. Okay, so maybe Leonard Fournette didn't quite live up to expectations, although it's worth remembering that Fournette was running back 6 in a half-point PPR fantasy points per game in his rookie year, only behind peak Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt. So all the other guys on this list, complete smashes. And I don't think there are many questions about Ashton Jeanty's bona fides as a prospect entering his rookie year. He's fast. He has great vision. He's used to big workloads, catches passes, and his contact balance, man. I mean, you need to hit Ashton Jeanty with an anvil if you want to knock him off his feet. The guy is so hard to bring down. But I think the key to an overall RB1 finish is the pace at which Raiders offensive coordinator Chip Kelly likes to run his offenses. Like, to say Chip Kelly favors a brisk pace would be an understatement. When he was head coach of the Eagles for 3 years, Philly finished 12th, 1st, and 2nd in offensive plays per game. In his first year in Philly, LaShawn McCoy led the league in carries with 314 and in rushing yards with 1,607. McCoy then had 312 carries the next year for 1,300 yards. Jeanty's going to get a lot of touches this year, and there's every reason to think he'll be highly effective on a per-touch basis. I have no issues with anyone who wants to take Ashton Jeanty in the top half of the first round in a 2025 fantasy draft.
And in reality, this is a first-round guy we're talking about. So as fun as I'm having with it, this was a guy, Jake, you came on months ago, and we're talking about Jeanty being a first-round pick for fantasy. So a first-round fantasy running back being the number 1 overall RB in fantasy isn't that crazy or anything like that. But it is a rookie, and it kind of stands out. What do you think? Is this a mild take, Jake?
Yes, I actually think this is pretty mild, mostly because of everything Fitz was saying. And if you go back to Saquon Barkley, I mean, look at last year, and everybody's going to focus on last year. Well, guess what? His rookie season, more points per game, on about 0.5, 0.6 more points per game than CMC. Why do I know this off the top of my head? Because the Barkley jersey you can't see behind me. I'm a huge Saquon Barkley fan. My dog is named Barkley, so there you go. But we're talking about his rookie season. I mean, he outscored and was better on a per-game basis than Christian McCaffrey. He didn't finish one, mostly because there was another huge name in front of him as well. But you look at it, the checkdowns, the opportunities out of the backfield, running routes, the screen passes, arrow routes, everything involved. That's all stuff that Jeanty can do a little bit differently, but it's all stuff he can do where you look at last year, the Seahawks, over 100 targets to Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet with Geno Smith, granted a different offensive style that you'll see with Chip Kelly that Fitz brought up. But you're talking about a potential for 90 to 100 targets for Jeanty if he's going to be that kind of a workhorse, where that's what I'm just going to keep referencing. You're talking about Saquon Barkley's rookie season, over 21 fantasy points per game. If he hits 21 fantasy points per game, even if he finishes his RB2, you're not going to be complaining, but that opens up the world to be the number 1 running back in 2025.
Just mild takes. We're going to round 2. We're going to up the spice just a tiny bit. But first, let's talk about our friends over at DraftKings, because it's officially the best time of the year for hoops fans, playoff drama, buzzer beaters, all the chaos we live for. And if you're done just watching and ready to actually win some cash, you got to check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25x your cash. And if you beat your competition, you could be looking at a 500x bag in your pocket. It's super simple. You just select your picks, track your score, and go for those big-time prizes. No gimmicks, just straight-up fun. Pick 6 is live in most states like Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and plenty more. So you can just go and build a lineup today. And don't settle for those weak payouts. Make your picks with Pick 6 and let your basketball brain pay off. New to DraftKings Pick 6, new customers toss in just $5 on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus bets instantly. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. The takes, they're moving up a little bit. We're going to test the spice. That was just mild. It's time for a little bit of medium. What do you like it on? Well, today we're going to put those on some quarterbacks. Jake, let's start with you. And your medium take for this bad boy.
Yeah, I almost considered putting this up as my mild, but then I'm like, you know what? We need quite a few jumps here across the board, and that's where I'm going to go with this. For Caleb Williams finishing as a top 3 quarterback. Top 10 almost feels like a cold take at this point, in that version of things of like it's not spicy at all. Top 5, I think, gets a little bit more, but I say top 3 puts it medium spice. It jumps over what we said before. And it's everything we've known. Like, we've talked about this entire offseason, starting from Ben Johnson down to drafting with very talented wide receivers, now their new number 3 with Burden, and then everything up and down with Loveland, and talking about Loveland getting opportunities. And you're looking at everything coming down this list, and Caleb Williams just has to make a little bit of a leg up in every category. And I say every category in the fact of, does he need to throw for Jared Goff's 4,600 yards and 35 to 40 touchdowns? No. But if he gets just over 4,000 yards, if he jumps from 20 to 25 passing touchdowns, which isn't a big hurdle to cover, hell, if he gets to 30, and he runs in a few. By the way, I don't think a lot of people realize how much he did actually run last year, especially when the Thomas Brown situation came over and he took control. And we even talked last year, said, Caleb Williams, stop running around in a circle. Actually run downfield. Like, take some of those opportunities and run. Ran for almost 500 yards, but didn't find the end zone once. And I'm not saying he's going to all of a sudden turn into Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, but you get 4 or 5 touchdowns on the ground without even an uptick in rushing, just offset on what he should be doing. You get another 500 passing yards. You get 5 passing touchdowns. All of those are pretty mild hurdles, I would say. To do all of them makes it a little bit more of a medium spice, but you do all those things, and why I bring them up. And just those minor improvements He's the 5th quarterback last year, just those minor ones. So if you see him throw for 4,400 yards, 30 touchdowns, keep running 500 plus yards and gets 5 touchdowns, now we're talking about a potential top 3 quarterback with all the weapons, this Ben Johnson offense, and I think everything's box checking where it's possible for it to happen this year.
Okay, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, those are your top 4 tier 1 quarterbacks. Who gets bumped down for Caleb in your medium take?
Well, Hurts was already behind the other two, even in points per game. So I'd say he bumps Jaden and Jalen. As much as that pains me.
Oh,
yeah.
Ha! It's burning. It's burning, Pat.
So
All right,
Lamar, Josh Allen, and then Caleb.
All right, so Jaden Daniels gets pushed back for this medium take. This one just spiced up a little bit. What do you think about Caleb as a top 3 quarterback?
I mean, it's a spicy take for sure, but it's plausible. I mean, look at what he has going for him now. The Bears went out and hired one of the most respected offensive architects as their head coach and play caller with Ben Johnson. They totally rebuilt the interior of their offensive line, which was such a huge problem for them last year. They went out and drafted Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. So now he's just, Caleb is awash in good, promising pass catchers with DJ Moore and Roma Dunze, who was a top 10 pick a year earlier, and Luther Burden and the 2 tight ends, Loveland and Kmet. Like, it's just, everything is there, and if there's not a major leap forward for Caleb, it's probably because it's an issue with Caleb and not with his ecosystem. So, and maybe, like, that could happen because Caleb is, you know, he's usually been at his best when playing out of structure, and I don't think Ben Johnson really wants him to play out of structure this year. So we'll see if he can be a more disciplined pocket-style passer with rushing upside, of course. But, yeah, like I think we could see a major quantum leap forward here.
Well, you're sticking with quarterbacks here. So your medium take is on which quarterback and how high? Could it be higher than Caleb? I don't know.
Yeah, I was worried my take might be too spicy for this level, but then it's very close to Jake's take, which is, you know, I have an optimistic prediction for a second-year quarterback, and it's that Drake Maye is going to finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback. We fantasy gamers want quarterbacks who run. Like, pocket passers have limited upside. Running quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, the upside is immense. This isn't a new concept. Cam Newton and Michael Vick back in the day, those guys had sky-high fantasy ceilings. I mean, Tim Tebow briefly had fantasy value, and there are probably a dozen people consuming this show right now who have more arm talent than Tim Tebow had. The thing is, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, they're all going to be really expensive in fantasy drafts this year. Like, those are the top 4 quarterbacks in ECR. They're all likely to be off the board by middle of the 4th round in home leagues, maybe earlier. One way to get a leg up on the competition is to get a running back, a running quarterback at a discount. And I think Drake Maye is your guy this year. Maye is an ECR of QB 18. I have him ranked QB 8 for redraft. I think Drake Maye is going to have a breakthrough season, and rushing is going to be a big part of it. Maye started 12 games as a rookie, but let's exclude week 18 since he only played 3 snaps before he got pulled. In the other 11 starts, Maye averaged 4.9 carries, 38.3 rushing yards. Over a full season, that works out to 651 rushing yards. I think there's even more rushing upside than that. As a sophomore at North Carolina, Maye had 698 rushing yards. That was in just 14 games. And bear in mind that in college, a quarterback's sack yardage is deducted from his rushing yardage. Maye lost about 200 yards in sacks that year. So Drake Maye, he had 2 TD runs last season, also meat left on the bone there. In his 2 seasons as a college starter, Maye had 16 touchdown runs in 26 games. So, I know, Maye averaged about 15.4 starts, fantasy points per start last season. But if you take out that Week 18 game and the Week 8 game against the Jets when he was knocked out of the game in the first quarter with a concussion, he would have averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game, and that was with arguably the worst supporting cast of any QB in the league. The Patriots have signed Stephon Diggs. They drafted Kyle Williams. They spent a top 5 pick on Will Campbell to guard Maye's blind side. They also signed Morgan Moses and Garrett Bradbury to improve the protection. Like, Maye is a screaming value in fantasy drafts. He's going to have a good season as a passer and a big season as a runner. He's going to finish top 5.
The trajectory of both of these is pretty big. I mean, QB 13 for Caleb Williams up to 3, QB 18 for Maye up to 5. Jake, are you buying Drake Maye has that potential of being a top 5? I mean, again, these are hot takes. We're not saying it's going to happen, but you buying it?
I would say similar to mine, it falls in the spicy uncomfortableness because I tried to make the Caleb Williams uncomfortable for me, and if you said top 5 for Maye, I'd be uncomfortable. Like, I don't hate anything that Fitz said, and honestly, if you were talking about the rushing value of the two, I would lean towards Drake Maye for what he brought up. I actually think there is more Josh Allen propensity to his game where you could see 7, 8, 10 touchdowns over a season depending on how he treats things, that being Maye. And also the coaching change here, which that actually brings why the uneasiness comes from me, because if you look at the best, like probably underneath the Vrabel's Tannehill, and like Tannehill's one season 21 fantasy points per game, which pushed him knocking on the door of the top 5. But that came with supreme touchdown efficiency. And that's where my hesitation comes in. Yes, they added Diggs. Yes, they added Kyle Williams. But you look at Maye last year and a lot of one-touchdown games. Again, working with some of the worst wide receivers you've ever seen for a quarterback to have to work with. But at the same time, like, that's going to be a pretty massive leap to if he's not going to get 4,000 yards, especially in this kind of offense, which I'm projecting in my mind that it might not be super pass heavy, probably more of a run balance, is the touchdowns are going to have to come. I do think he'll get them on the legs. That's where I do think he has the advantage over Williams. But I'm worried about the passing game. So it's spicy enough that it makes me uncomfortable, which I think that's what these are supposed to do.
Yeah, well, and mild and medium, those are the easy take home. Let's just try it. But now let's move into hot. We are now getting into our hot territory, some bigger takes. We are going to test everybody and how much can you handle these. And Jake, we're going to just jump right back into you. This is hot take number 1. How hot is it?
I think this one, I think my top 3 are bordering on, like, you could make an argument for any of the 3, especially starting with this one, because I think a lot of people are looking at the Dolphins backfield and they're excited for Devon Etienne to get potentially more, but I think some of that's coach speak. Let's be honest about his size, and if you want to get him murdered, you will give him 20 touches a game. What worked so well for Etienne 2 years ago is sharing that backfield with Raheem Mostert. Well, everybody, where I'm going is not Jalen Wright, because the weird thing I thought about Jalen Wright when they took him last year was like, that's more Etienne than it is Mostert. Well, who did they draft? Who is more like Mostert in that power, in that role, in when they get to the red zone and they have the efficiency they had the Dolphins as a whole 2 years ago, it was all because of the touchdowns for Mostert. I do not think Ollie Gordon is even close to Mostert on the breakaway potential with the speed and everything. You know, like, even Mostert's power, part of the appeal of the Dolphins was the speed. But if somebody is going to be Mostert in this backfield, I think it's more likely to be Ollie Gordon. Not the biggest Ollie Gordon fan, but saying all that is you set up that backfield and they use him like they did Mostert 2 years ago, and he's going to be a top 20 running back, and it won't be Jalen Wright.
Wow. That one, that's a hot one. That's a hot one. All right, let's hear it, Pat. What do you think about Gordon as a top 20 RB?
Yeah, so I really don't have any problem with the notion of Ollie Gordon surpassing Jalen Wright on the depth chart. Like, I'm not the biggest Jalen Wright fan. I know there are a lot of people who think there could be a big year 2 coming. I'm not really, like, I thought Dylan Sampson is the way more talented Tennessee running back than Jalen Wright, and I've heard I forget who.
I'm good with that.
I forget who tweeted it, but someone said about Jalen Wright when he was coming out of Tennessee that he runs like he has a blindfold on. So, you know, and Ollie Gordon, man, like I think it was his sophomore season, like his second to last college season, whether that was junior or sophomore year, but he ran for like close to 1,800 yards that year, and he looked like just a monster. And then he had a weird final year where I think he got a DUI in the summer before his season and just kind of wasn't the same guy. But, like, if he can tap into that near 1,800 yard season he had, like, yeah, the juice is there. I guess my bigger issue and the reason this is such a spicy take is the top 20 thing. Like,
yeah,
I mean, Jonas Savanea was a nice add in the draft, but like I just can't see this being anything but a bottom 10 offensive line. And it seems like Ollie Gordon is the kind of guy who, to really pop, might need a top offensive line to help him make it happen. And I don't think he's going to get that this year. But I'm really intrigued by how things are going to shake out on the depth chart behind Etienne this year.
It's funny you say that, because originally I said I felt like Spicy Enough would be top 30. And then I look last year and I'm looking at David Montgomery with 12 touchdowns in 14 games, just cracking over 1,000 yards, 300 of it coming in the receiving game, but 775 and 12 on the ground. And he was RB 18. Now that's overall, not points per game, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of why I shifted. Like, I wanted to say top 30, but then I'm like, this is supposed to be my third tier take, and I feel like I have to push top 20, especially if I'm going to say he's going to get double-digit touchdowns for it to happen.
Also, it's like definitely a representation of we all don't treat Spice the same way. Spicy takes or Spice that this, you could have put this in any direction. Ollie Gordon is RB 63 on Fantasy Pros consensus ranks right now, ADP 69. So this is a very, very fun take. All right, your hot take, number 3 on the take meter here.
How do you just let that go that this is a spicy take and he's RB 69 spicy? Like,
Yeah.
how did you just let that slide by?
Nice. Yeah, I know. All right, Pat, your hot take is who?
It's Travis Hunter, and he will amass fewer than 600 receiving yards as a rookie and will primarily play cornerback by 2026. And this is not, I can assure you, about Travis Hunter running some, let's say, aesthetically displeasing routes in OTAs or making some body catches. Like, it's silly to bag on Hunter because of a few video clips posted on Twitter from an OTA. But I do think it's fair to say that Hunter's technique could use some refinements. He might not be a ready-made NFL wide receiver 1 like Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or Malik Neighbors, or like his teammate Brian Thomas, who's already one of the best receivers in the league. And then there's the two-way thing to worry about with Hunter this year. Like, he might be a wide receiver first. That's what the Jaguars are saying. But he's going to play some cornerback too. And if he pulls double duty, Hunter isn't going to have a snap share of 90% or more at wide receiver the way most of the top receivers do. His snap share offensively could be closer to 70%. And the Jaguars do not have a good group of cornerbacks. I think their top 4 are Jordan Lewis, Tyson Campbell, Monteric Brown, and Jerrion Jones. When the Jaguars have to face the Bengals in Week 2 with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, when they have to face the Rams in Week 7 with Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, when they have to face the Chiefs, the 49ers, the 2 games against the Texans with C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and those Iowa State rookies. Are we sure Travis Hunter is only going to play limited snaps at cornerback? Like, isn't it going to be tempting to put him on the field much more than that to help slow down some of these top receivers, and then maybe that affects his usage on the offensive end? So, I mean, like, Travis Hunter is an athletic freak. I'm not knocking him. I thought he was the best player in this year's draft. But I also thought Hunter was better as a cornerback than as a receiver in college. I just think it's very possible Hunter plays a lot less wide receiver and a lot more cornerback than people are expecting in 2025. I think there's a chance the Jaguars change course and use Hunter primarily as a corner in 2026 after Hunter puts up some mediocre receiving numbers in year 1.
Jake, what do you think is the spicier take? The lack of success statistically for Travis Hunter as a wide receiver, or him playing more as a cornerback? And I understand how those can coincide, but like, what is the bigger take? He is more of a cornerback than wide receiver, or that he kind of is a little bit of a fantasy failure as a wideout?
I think the spicier part is the fantasy failure, mostly because we talked about this a few weeks ago. I actually think it was Fitz and I with somebody who maybe even Worm, is that the coaching change, if it happened, like, we could see the difference, and that was part of our concern. Like, if the Browns drafted him and were like, screw it, we have a new regime coming in, and the new regime doesn't see him as a wide receiver and sees him only as a quarter, like, that was the risk. Going to the Jaguars, obviously that concern is mostly out the window. But I will say the concern we're going to have in fantasy is it's kind of like, do you open the envelope? Like Fitz brought it up. Like, at what point do they stop saying, like, we can't leave potentially our best corner from day one, potentially, right now, best corner on the sidelines just because we want to use him at wide receiver? Fitz and I differ a little bit on Hunter. I'm a little bit more positive in general, and I think that's why I lean towards the fantasy would be more shocking for me, too, because I kind of gave the mishmash of Devontae Smith and Jackson Smith and Jigba. I called them Devontae Smith and Jigba because it works so well. But even so, even if I throw those two names out to you and say they only get 80% of the offensive snaps, you can still see a path to top 40 at worst because of what those wide receivers would bring. And you look down this depth chart, I'm not scared of anybody else on this wide receiver crew outside of my boy Brian Thomas, obviously, but he can be the number 2, and they got rid of Evan Ingram, so we're talking about Brenton Strange as a nice sleeper for people, but I think he's clearly the number 2. The question is, do they let him play as much as he conceivably can, which I think as us, I think because Deion Sanders of the world aren't a thing anymore, we're kind of like, oh, it's like baseball, two-way players. You know this. It's like once you get to college, you make the choice, Welsh. I think that's so far in the past that we're kind of like, I can't see it. I don't know that there's – Travis Hunter's ability, I don't know that it's inconceivable to say he could play 80% of the offense, 80% of the defense, week in and week out. Like, why are we like this? I'm not saying Fitz is saying this. I'm just saying, like, why is everybody, just the community in general, saying, like, that's just not going to happen? What if it does? And what if he's good at both? And so that's why I think that would be more a surprise. I could see a path to them saying, forget it. He's just so shut down at corner. We need to put him there because that's where more value lies, because it's easier to replace a wide receiver than it is a corner of that talent. So I'm more with that. It's definitely a spicy take because I think he easily clears 600, at least also to my projections, clears 600 yards receiving. But I do like where, we're making reasons for these takes. And everything Fitz said is a sound reason why this could happen.
And Travis Hunter takes us to this week's Chasing Challenges, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like the athletes who push boundaries and redefine what's possible, business decision makers today are turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft meets you where you are with tools and guidance to help you make an impact with safe, secure AI solutions. Players and teams are facing their own challenges. In this segment, we spotlight athletes or teams who are currently undergoing a challenge, what this means from a fantasy or betting standpoint, and examining how we think they can overcome it. And whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week, we're discussing Travis Hunter because we haven't seen a two-way player in quite some time, especially to this degree. The capital in which Hunter was drafted screams wide receiver, but the team could be pressed, like we talked about, by a lack of poor defense and potential struggles like Pat laid out, which could push the team to get him to impact on the other side of the ball. It's to be debated, but no two-way player has had more pressure put on them to perform offensively while being a world-class defender. And in the fantasy realm, he is ranked on Fantasy Pros ECR as wide receiver 31. That is a starting wide receiver in most fantasy spots. That's it for this week's Chasing Challenges. And remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. Gentlemen, we move on to the two big dogs. We are getting into spicy. We go from hot to spicy. This is the fourth of the hottest takes here. And Mr. Jake Ciely, we are going to jump to you in the running back world. And this one definitely made me do a double take here. So I like it. This one burns a little bit because we've had some high expectations in the past. We've been burned by this player. So your spicy take is what?
My spicy take, and one of the words I use might be shocking to some people, but Travis Etienne returns to being a top 5 running back. I think people have quickly forgotten that 2023 Travis Etienne was a top 5 running back. Finished ahead of somebody that Liam Cohen's running back from last year replaced, and Rachaad White. It was 2 spots behind him, and then Rachaad White got replaced last year. And I think that's the concern everybody has, is that Cohen's coming in. He's going to do a new Bucky Irving. Everybody's over Bashal Tutin and taking over this backfield, and hey, he's replacing the guy that wasn't his and replacing the guy that was volume reliant and everything. And I get it. And I actually think this is going to be a headache of a backfield if I'm being truthful. And I think there is a path to Tootin winning out. But, don't take too much into OTAs, but some of the Tootin concerns we saw in college have already shown up in OTAs, and Cohen's been outspoken about it. Now, of course, the fumbling issues and stuff like that, and these are things that have plenty of time to be fixed before the season starts. But what do we know about Etienne? We know who Etienne is. He was very inefficient last year. Bigsby looked better at times. There's some talk of whether or not Etienne was 100% for part of the season. But the biggest reason I think this is a possibility, again, we are painting pictures here of how this could happen, is what is Cohen coming from as before he was an offensive coordinator, and then when he was an offensive coordinator, and now he's head coach situation, this is a bell cow running backfield most of the time when Cohen's involved as an offensive running backs coach. Like all of his pieces that he's been throughout the path have been involving bell cow-ish running backs. So we're talking about somebody who's going to touch the ball 18 plus times a week. He doesn't very often employ or work with a committee. And I think a lot of people are scared it's going to be a full-blown committee. Well, if Tootin struggles, keep going. Bigsby's not a passing game option. Etienne, for all his flaws, is good enough in blitz pickup. He's good. He's really good in the passing game. It's getting some of that efficiency back as a runner. But if you look at somebody who his cutting ability and his elusiveness in what could be the Cohen offense actually thinks fits better than what they had last year with Jacksonville. So all that being said, it is a super spicy take. But there is a path where Etienne gets back to 270 touches plus and leads this backfield and ends up being the best value because everybody's looking for Bucky Irving to be Tootin and maybe even Bigsby kind of form a committee between just those two. We might be staring the answer right in our face and just dismissing them too quickly.
Pat, do you think this is a take where you're going to need to get a big old glass of milk and just chug this down? Because this is a messy situation. You've got three running backs that are between like 35 and 50 altogether. You're looking at ECR. Travis Etienne is RB, 35.5 PPR. Tank Bigsby is 38, and Tootin is at 49. And Tootin has obviously been a big, buzzy guy. So this is a messy RB situation with a guy that seems to be going in the wrong direction, yet is thrust into the top 5. So how much does this one burn?
Yeah, I'll try an Indian food metaphor here, Welsh. And like you could actually look at this as in a way as sort of a milder chicken tikka masala type take, because it wasn't that long ago, as Jake pointed out, that Etienne was a really prolific fantasy back, 2023. But the reason I think Jake cranks this take up to Lamb Vindaloo level is that like it was kind of a tale of two seasons in 2023. The first half of the year, I think Etienne might have been RB1 or RB2. Yeah. He was averaging better than 20 fantasy points a game in PPR, I think, first half. And then over the second half, he was averaging something, it was more like 13.5 PPR fantasy points a game. So he was still like, not a bad running back, but just not as, not the league-winning type guy he was in the first half of that season. And then I don't know what happened last year, but like if you look at next-gen stats and rushing yards over expected per carry, Travis Etienne was underwater in that. Like he had a negative rushing yards over expectation per carry, and pretty much by every measure, whether it's yards after contact per attempt, forced missed tackles, like Tank Bigsby was just the better running back. Like
I'll give you the numbers while you're doing this. So through week 8, he was second behind McCaffrey at 18.8 points per game. After the bye in week 9, even including a 25-point game in week 17, he dropped from 18.8 to 11.5 that year.
That was 2023.
Yeah.
So there was a drop off, and then like the downward slide continued this past year, and then now the fact that he's going into the last year of his contract, they just drafted Bashal Tootin. They've got a couple of years on Tank's deal left. It just seems like for a franchise that probably is not Super Bowl bound and doesn't have major playoff aspirations this year, just kind of setting the table for 2026. And I wonder if Etienne's going to be a part of that when they've got Tootin and Bigsby signed on long term. So pretty
Hey,
spicy.
We could light this one on fire and be super spicy by August when he's not even on the team anymore.
Yeah, go in the complete opposite direction.
I mean, that might work for Jake if he winds up on Dallas or.
That's a good point. Yeah.
All right. Well, I like this because the spicy take here, we've talked a lot about like these guys moving up. I mean, that's obviously where, in the bold prediction world or the hot takes, there's like a big positive conversation around it. Pat, you're not going to do that here. Your spicy take is going to go super negative.
He's being so negative.
Yeah, this is going to be really negative. And, I mean, it just seems like it's unanimous that Marvin Harrison is going to take a big step forward in year 2. But I'm going to say that after finishing wide receiver 30 in PPR fantasy scoring as a rookie, Harrison actually has a worse season in year 2. So Harrison is coming off this disappointing rookie season in which he had 62 catches, 885 yards, 8 touchdowns. Those aren't really bad numbers at all. Certainly not by rookie standards, but he's no ordinary rookie. This guy's a prodigy, the son of Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison Sr., the 4th overall pick in last year's draft. Harrison finished wide receiver 30 despite having good touchdown luck to finish that high. Like 12.9% of his catches were touchdowns. 6.9% of his targets were touchdowns. Like those percentages are pretty high among other receivers. I have some serious concerns about Harrison's usage and his chemistry with Kyler Murray. Harrison's average depth of target as a rookie was 13.4 yards. They were using him as a vertical receiver. And like Jamar Chase, who led all receivers in fantasy scoring last year, his average depth of target, 8.7 yards. Justin Jefferson, average depth of target, 10.9 yards. Like Harrison is just totally miscast as this take the top off vertical receiver. But like, I don't know if that is the fault of Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing or Kyler Murray. Like the book on Kyler is that he is not effective throwing to the middle of the field, possibly because he's small and makes him hard to see over all those big bodies in front of him. But Jacob Gibbs of CBS, friend of the show, he pointed out a few months ago that Harrison actually had one of the best success rates among all wide receivers last year on routes over the middle. The problem was that he ran only a quarter of his routes over the middle. 3/4 were on the perimeter. Marvin Harrison Jr. just isn't a pure perimeter receiver. So I worry that MHJ isn't going to take the great leap forward that many people are expecting, and his touchdown luck could be worse in 2025. So Trey McBride's still going to be Kyler Murray's preferred short area target. Marvin Harrison Jr. is actually going to finish worse in PPR fantasy points per game this year.
Jake, how hot is this one? Is this negative? Because I do agree, like, there's been a lot of conversation. It's second year. We're going to take a next big step here. But is him failing to even meet last year's expectation, is that spicy enough for you?
Failing to meet last year, like of all the takes, I actually, if I had to shuffle Fitz, I would actually put this one a little cooler, just because I do think, like, it's funny. It was either last week or the week before. We talked Marvin Harrison on the podcast I was on this show. And my opinion of Marvin Harrison was the opposite direction. And it was a similar, it wasn't spicy takes. It was kind of like more like, hey, things that we can see in wide receivers you want to be on as breakouts next year. And I brought up Harrison and the fact that, like, the target volume should be there. Like, I know people are bringing up Michael Wilson again and all the rest and Dortchland and blah, 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 blah. But it's really McBride and Harrison. And one of the things I brought up, interesting enough, is Harrison had double the end zone, not red zone, end zone targets of Trey McBride last year. What if that comfortableness starts to grow with McBride more, which it should have been, and that part was why I almost had Trey McBride as that knocking off Brock Bowers originally as my take, and I switched it to George Kittle because I could see all this. But the concerns of Harrison, I'm glad Fitz said some of this, is that, you know, I had him in tier 1 with Odunze and Neighbors last year as rookies. A lot of people had Harrison almost on like a tier of himself, and not know everybody did, but like there were some people. But a lot of what Fish just said is that the concern I had for Harrison is his inability to always clear coverage. And if you saw last year, looking at separation scores, which is a new thing that people are starting to bring up, he was middle of the pack. He was like in the 50% range, which as Fitz brings up, is why you don't want him on the perimeter all the time. On the flip side, I referenced the same thing everybody else saw when he was doing jumping jacks in the middle of the field, saying, I'm wide open. And Kyler Murray, go back to that play. I know everybody didn't always look through the start of the play. Kyler Murray looked at him on that play. What we all saw was that he didn't look back to him again. And I brought that up in my argument to say there's going to be better rapport with Murray and Harrison this year. But what if it's slightly better? The touchdown luck isn't as good. There's still the same issues on the outside and they don't play him off. So all that being said is I don't think it's a crazy thing. I would say top 30 almost feels like his floor at this point because of everything that went wrong last year and he still hit that. But if he finished 44th, I'd be like, you know what? I'm not shocked. I'm not falling out of my chair. To use your Indian take level, I thought you were going to say the numbers because I got the Indian food for the first time ever a few years ago, and I was like, oh, I'll get a 3. That's not that bad. And I'm like, ooh, that's actually kind of uncomfortable for me. This feels like a 3. Like if you said not inside the top 40, I'd be like, okay, that's like a 5 or a 6 because I think it goes up to 7, right?
Yeah, I do agree with Jake. This is where you're, at a Chinese restaurant ordering the thing with 3 peppers underneath, thinking you're going to get like the super hot one.
I thought you guys might go Scoville like type of meters, but yeah, if you just use the like number of peppers, you're like that one's not going to do.
And then then this one is a little mild, so this one might be milder than like the Drake Maye take.
Well, I have a promise for you. Okay. I have a promise for everybody. Pat's going to come in really hot on the extra spicy.
Really hard with the top one.
It's the biggest of them. Our faces are going to turn red, and just get ready for it. I promise you.
I thought mine was aggressive.
Yeah, we're coming in super hot on the last one, the extra spicy one. But before we get to that, I want to remind you guys you can level up fantasy football draft prep with Fantasy Pros Mock Draft Simulator. You can complete realistic mock drafts in minutes. Without waiting between picks, you can jump in on some of these spicy takes. You can test how it looks in your own roster construction. Tailor your mock drafts to your league's specific settings, include roster configurations and scoring systems. You'll also receive instant feedback and draft grades to refine your strategy and gain a competitive edge. Prepare confidently and dominate your draft with Mock Draft Simulator at fantasypros.com/mock. That's fantasypros.com/mock. The final on the Fantasy Pros Hot Takes meter here is our extra spicy. This is the top of the meter for today, the spiciest of spicy takes. Jake, you are going to kick it off here. What is your extra spicy biggest take of the day?
I will say, not only does Cooper Kupp get comeback player of the year, he is outscoring JSN and finishes as a top 10 as a wide receiver 1. That is... Yeah, especially I've seen the comments alone on the JSN talk when we did break out wide receivers and all that type of stuff, and then like everybody's on board with JSN, and for good reason. But here's like we had to be aggressive, and I feel like this is an aggressive one. What I'm going to go to here, like again, I'm trying to create the narrative of how this happens. Similar to what we were just talking about, I want Cooper Kupp to play some slot. I don't want him only playing on the outside, but if we go to the Vikings from last year and we say, who's more like Justin Jefferson? It's actually Cooper Kupp. And if you look at the usage with the Rams and what Cooper Kupp has been, it more replicates the usage downfield, depth of target, where he's being targeted, than it does JSN. JSN is an amazing kind of that hybrid-y big slot kind of situation, and I think that if one was going to be Justin Jefferson, I would take Jackson Smith and Jigba. This is why it's a hot take. But I'm just painting a world where I say, okay, well, look at what Sam Darnold did with the Vikings. If he happens to do the same thing, it's going to come with Cooper Kupp in that role for the touchdowns, more downfield, less over the middle, less short yardage type of stuff, and that's where I'm going. I think this is the long shot of long shots. If you want to make a super long shot bet, I don't know any site that would actually even give you this one because it's insane. But again, Sam Darnold, his usage, the similarities between of how he could likely use these two wide receivers, I just think there's a chance, a very slim one, but I think there's a chance that Cooper Kupp rebounds. They gave him a 3-year contract for whatever reason, but rebounds and actually shows some life late in his career in a different way that he was kind of used late with the Rams now that Puka Nacua took over, and he surpasses JSN and finishes a top 10 wide receiver. As I say that, I want to hang my head in shame, but I know Fitz is going to trump me with his. So, like, I don't feel that bad of what's coming.
I've been sitting here uncomfortable in my seat the whole time that you've been doing that one too, just kind of like moving around, like, all right.
I'm gonna watch back on video because I felt like my butt was clenched, and I was like kind of like the whole time.
Did you guys ever see Jennifer Lawrence on Hot Ones, where she's just like kind of crying, like, why are you doing this to me? That's what these two are doing for me. I want to remind you that Cooper Kupp is 47 and half PPR ECR, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is 12. So
10?
this is 12. He's a wide receiver 1 to a basically flex. What do you think about this, Pat? I feel like I kind of like I'm scared personally to get back into the Cooper Kupp business. I think a lot of us got back into it last year. We're like, man, the value and the usage just didn't look like the same wide receiver. But do you think the system can be enough that this extra spicy take can actually live up?
I mean, it's definitely spicy because there's a chance Cooper Kupp is just completely washed, and that's why he stopped earning targets, or at least the sort of targets he had previously earned when he was getting, even some 20 target games with Puka Nacua around. But the thing is, what if maybe that was more about health? And what if he's fully healthy this year? And what if Cooper Kupp actually plays more slot than JSN, and they mostly make JSN like their Z receiver? Like, if that happens, then I wouldn't be surprised if Kupp actually out-targeted and maybe even out-produced JSN. So, like, I can see a path to where this happens. But, am I going to bet on that being the most likely outcome? Certainly not. This is a pretty spicy take.
I'm sure we'll have some comments in the comments section about this one. I will throw this out to you, and you guys can drop this in the comments outside of just, Kupp, all the chaos that's going to cause. How much would you have loved for these gentlemen to both be having to go through the extra spicy, eating it and trying to give their take, trying to actually give you the reasoning behind the take while experience the physical sauce? That is what I want to know. Drop it in the comments, because this one I would pay good money to. I would pay good money to not only get to hear this explanation, but do you have the full-on spice for this one? Pat, you're going to finish it off. Your extra spicy take is going down a road that so many just can't do, but you're willing to do it. The extra spicy take is whom?
Yeah, at the top of the show, I talked about those hot sauces that my old employers used to order from the mail order catalog, where they would cause physical discomfort. I know this one's going to cause physical discomfort for a lot of people. And the take is that Kyle Pitts is going to have the best season of his career and will finish the season as a top 3 fantasy tight end. Everyone has totally given up on Kyle Pitts by now, and if you're opening, I'm just totally opening myself up to ridicule by continuing to champion Kyle Pitts after all the heartbreak he's caused. But Falcons offensive coordinator Zach Robinson recently said on a podcast that he expects Pitts to take a big jump in year 2 of Robinson's system. And I know there's been a lot of excuse making for Pitts. In fairness, though, he was playing in a new system last year, and Kirk Cousins was pretty clearly cooked. Michael Penix Jr. has crazy arm talent. He can be the rising tide that lifts all boats in the Atlanta passing game this year. Pitts is still only 24 years old. He played his first NFL game at the age of 20 and wound up with over 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. Sorry, but I'm not ready to give up on Kyle Pitts yet. Pitts has averaged 8 yards per target in his 4 NFL seasons. That's not bad. Travis Kelce has averaged 8.7 per target for his career. TJ Hawkinson has averaged 7.1 yards per target for his career. That's almost a full yard worse than Kyle Pitts, and yet there are plenty of people willing to bet on TJ Hawkinson this year. And, I mean, wouldn't it be the epitome of fantasy football for Kyle Pitts to absolutely crush it this year, now that even his most staunch defenders have abandoned him? Yes, it would be. And it's going to happen. Kyle Pitts smashes this year, finishes as a top 3 fantasy tight end in 2025.
Jake, your cheeks got red. You look like you literally legitimately ate something like that.
I think it's still hangover from mine.
It is an extra spicy take in this world. What do you think? I mean, Kyle Pitts, top 3. We know he has the talent. I mean, this last year, 2 years ago, mild. This is mild as can be. but he has continuously not lived up to it. Jake, what do you think about Kyle Pitts as a top 3 tight end?
So I actually want to harp on your point there about he has the talent. I actually think his talent is part of the issue. I don't think he's a great tight end, and I think he's miscast as a wide receiver. He's in between, and I think that's the problem with him. I'm not calling him them, but just think back to like the Devin Funchess, Kelvin Benjamins of the world, where they tried to do, but like they just didn't fit it either, and that ended up being their own destruction. I think part of what we found out about Pitts is year one, where he was kind of used, took the league a little bit by surprise. It's not like they didn't know who the guy was, but the usage in year one and the volume that was there and the opportunity was like, okay, you know what? It's pretty good as a wide receiver / tight end too. And then the NFL said, you know what? He's really easy to stop when we treat him as blank. And they kind of started treating him as like, let's play contain over him as a tight end. Like, let's not let him just burn past our linebackers. And the NFL's changed too, where we see like linebackers aren't as much as a thing that they were 5-10 years ago. And I know he hasn't been around that long, but my entire point being is I think Kyle Pitts 10 years ago would be destroying the league. It's just Kyle Pitts today is in a different world. I hope Fitz is right. Like, I hope, because now he's free. He's beyond free. Like, you just go take a flyer in the 14th round and be like, oh my God, even a top 10 tight end, and we're excited. Jonnu Smith. Maybe he turns into Jonnu Smith this year. But the thing is, they need to throw to somebody else. Part of the reason I'm on Darnell Mooney is because I think people forgot about him and his potential here is like, it can't all be Drake London. If we're on board with Michael Penix being a thing, and I'm a Michael Penix fan, somebody else is involved. At least 2 other people have involved. So there is a world where it could happen. But I think what you're bringing up and why this makes somebody uncomfortable and why Fitz put this as his number 1 is because we've also seen everything since his rookie season and seen the problems with Kyle Pitts in the NFL. So maybe they figure something out. And maybe they figure out the right way to use them and create the mismatches by moving them in different places. But yeah, this one would shock me. And but I hope he's right. Like, I legitimately hope he's right, because I'm not giving up. Like, if you're going to give him for free, I'll take the flyer.
Well, if you made it all to the end, all the way to the end, congratulations for getting through all these fantasy hot takes. We want to hear what your favorite hot take was. And if you have your own mild, medium, hot, spicy, or extra spicy take, drop it in the comments below. Let's see how crazy we can get, and whether you like spice or not. Maybe next time we'll actually be downing some of the hot sauces.
I think these top 2 are more like nuke your intestines takes.
Yeah, I think this one might have affected you in a way that might have been too much of a problem, Jake. That might have been a little too worrisome. So he is Jake Ciely, Pat Fitzmaurice. I'm Chris Welsh. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us here. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of it. Make sure you go check out the mock draft simulator this draft season for all the hot takes and more. Thank you for hanging out with us right here on Fantasy Pros, the football podcast. We'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.